Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Backstage Spotlight. It's our 25th episode. Can we believe it? A quarter of the way to 100. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Oliver Tompsett, who's joining us.
Hello there, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm very well, very well.
Good. Would you like to introduce yourself and say a bit about what you've done in the past?
Hello, my name is Oliver Tompsett. As we can see up here, as Matilda's very technologically advanced, I would use would be the term for that. My name is Oliver Tompsett, and I am an actor who has mainly worked in musical theatre and been lucky enough to be in many West End shows for the last 20 years of my career, ranging from being a swing, being in the ensemble and understudying, right through to getting my lucky break of playing lead roles, and then luckily up to this date, touch wood, maintaining landing quite a few big lead roles in the West End. So I've been very lucky, but it also has come with a lot of hard work.
Yeah, I can imagine. But what a career you've had so far. How did it all start for you? Have you always liked performing?
I think when I was younger, as far as I can remember, a long time ago, I I liked storytelling and I liked singing and I enjoyed dancing and acting. But I remember when I was younger, I didn't like doing it in front of people. I didn't like actually performing.
Yeah.
Um, I found that really weird and hard because I knew that if I wanted to take it further, ultimately I'm going to have to do it in front of people. It's no good. You can't be a professional unless you're entertaining people. So it was a weird thing. And even when I went to college, actually, I still found it quite tricky to stand in front of people. I just get very nervous. I think looking back on that was a sign that I just really cared about it. And when I was to put something I cared about so much in front of people, that sort of imposter syndrome and that fear of not doing it to your best ability or people maybe not liking it, sort of I found quite overwhelming. But I very quickly got over that, and now as much as I do suffer from nerves, I'm very comfortable in front of people, and I actually thrive on telling stories in front of audiences. The bigger the audience, the better.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's really important because I get a lot of people saying, I'm just too nervous to do it. And what would you say you have gained from just getting up and doing things like that at a college level?
Yeah, I mean, back at college level, the training, obviously they give you the performance opportunities and stuff, and even just the acting through song classes, like getting up in front of your peers, is kind of harder, and it's actually harder to stand in front of an audition panel of like four than it is in front of a theatre of 1,000. Do you know what I mean? I find it much harder. You can see their faces, and when it sort of gets into sort of the hundreds, you kind of go, I have no control over the fact that there's going to be a small percentage of people who maybe prefer someone else. But when you're in an audition room, you're trying to impress a small amount of people and you want them to give you the job. And it's the same way when you're at college, when you're performing in front of your classmates. Even though you're there to make mistakes, and your classmates all know that none of us are perfect. It's still quite nerve-wracking that you're being analysed and stuff like that. So it definitely gets easier. But so I think you learn sort of courage at college if you're willing to sort of overcome those feelings. I remember there were some people at college who would make all the excuses to actually get up and perform in front of people. And then as soon as they sort of did it, they suddenly, the next time you did it, it got easier. And I think that's the same with everything in life. It's just nothing is easy when you do it for the first time, and something is much easier once you've done it 100 times. So it's just getting to that 100th performance or 500th performance or whatever it is, and knowing that it's going to get easier, that is sort of the driving force of, right, I've got to feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah, it really is that first hurdle. And let's
Yeah.
talk about auditions. So when you get an audition through, what is your like usual process of preparation?
Well, I mean, now is obviously far different than it would have been 20 years ago when I left college. But the process now would be to look at what I'm auditioning for and to be realistic with myself of how do I want the job? Can I see myself doing the job? And if both of those are sort of a yes, then it's to look at the material I'm given, if I'm given material, and if not, to choose the right material that represents me best in the role that I see myself playing. And just following my instincts, really, because I think sometimes nowadays people get given so much of a brief to sort of meet for an audition that they focus so much on that rather than what represents them best. For instance, you'll be given an audition and they'll say, can you bring along a pop song or a traditional musical theatre or Rodgers and Hammerstein piece or something written by and you can get wrapped up so much in sort of trying to meet the brief that you actually end up going in there and not sounding your best. So my advice I always give to people is to always make sure you sound your best first, because if you sing something that they don't think is right, but you sound amazing, they're going to give you a recall. Whereas if you try and do something that meets the brief perfectly, but you're not used to singing it and you've only had a couple of days to prepare it, or you don't think you sound good doing it, my advice is don't do it. Now, I mean, that's easy for me to say once I'm an established performer, but ultimately you want to sound and look your best in front of a casting director and a directing team. And if you're not right for a piece, if you can't do the certain style or you don't think it represents you the best, then you want to book the room, because they're going to cast other jobs, they're going to cast other shows. So make sure ultimately you always sound your best. So yes, have a repertoire of songs that do cover all the different styles and ranges you're going to be asked to do, but don't ever let that compromise you at your best. So I would, go back to your question, ultimately prepare to be the best I can and for the as right as I can for the role. And then I would just put the work in, really. I would just make sure that no stone goes unturned. If it's a scene, I would learn the material inside out. I will mine through a piece and find the nuances and find sort of beats to hit. Because sometimes when you're given one scene in the show, that might only hit, one or two ranges of emotion. But if there's an opportunity for you to show some of the other stuff they need throughout the show in that one scene, then throw it in and take a risk. So once I've sort of mined through it and I know it inside out, I just sort of give myself a break as well, really. I think as I'm getting older, you just sort of realise that the casting director and the directors, when you walk in the room, they're already on your side. They want you to book the job. They called you and they're looking for someone to book the job. So they're already on your side. So don't go in there thinking, oh God, they're going to hate me, because they're not. They already want you to be the person. And sometimes if you're not the person, if you come in there with the right attitude and you've done the work and you sound your best and stuff like that, they're going to keep you in mind for something else. And that's the reality of our industry, is 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a no. So go in there and just be you and be the best you can, because it's a law of numbers. Eventually, you're going to book the job. But we, especially with self-tapes for like TV and stuff, me and my wife always sort of say, right, book the room. It takes the pressure off you trying to get that job. It just makes you doing the best you can. Do your job, which is to be the best actor you can at that time. And whether you get the job or not is a lottery. So be your best and book the room.
Yeah, it's really great advice. Out of all the auditions you have done, what would you say is the most memorable one, for good or for bad?
God, yeah. I mean, there's 2 that spring to mind, and one would be sort of the first audition I had for theatre when I was at college, and I was so stuck inside myself that I remember going into that room, and the panel was sitting on one side of the room. Behind them was a load of just windows. I think it might have been at Dance Attic or something like that in Fulham, and there was just a load of windows. And I came in and I was so nervous, my mouth was dry, and I looked out the window and I sang the song, and then all I remember is sort of a couple of seconds going by and then the song being over. Now, I think I did probably the whole song, but it felt like that. It went by so quickly. And the feedback I got from my agent was, they were like, oh, they loved your voice, but they said that you were just like, there was nothing there. And I was like, and I was gutted for me because, we want to be storytellers and you want to give off some personality and stuff. But I wasn't surprised because I was like, I don't remember it. I just remember looking out the window, looking at sort of a brick on a building, and not really taking my focus off that. So I got so caught up in the nerves and the idea that I needed to sound perfect and I needed everything to be perfect that it made me froze. I was completely frozen. And then maybe a year later, I did an audition and I didn't prepare for it at all. They gave me a scene in the song, and I did not look at it. And to this day, I don't know why. I don't know why. And I turned up and I had this music. Like, I don't sight read either. And they were like, right, so you got to sing the song? I was like, yep. And they're like, cool, can you do it? I was like, yeah. And just was like kind of just going along, but I hadn't done any work. And the choreographer had seen me in one of my third year final shows, and she was like, okay, I've told them you're really good and you're not being good. What's going on? And I went home and I was like, wake up, Ollie, you need to do the work. And I think from that point on, I kind of became the other end of the spectrum where I was just obsessed with getting it right. And my wife will tell you, she's like, God, you don't have to be that word perfect. And I'm like, I do. I have to do the work and be in control because otherwise I'm not going to work. So there's those sort of two jobs near the beginning, two stories near the beginning of my career. But then there is when I auditioned for the show & Juliet, which is one of the last productions I did. And I almost didn't go to that because I had a stomach problem, I had like a bit of a bug.
Oh
And I
no.
felt really rough. And I'd been called in last minute. But, this was only, 5 years ago. So I had my two children and a family to support. So you kind of, at that point, your why and your sort of drive to keep getting jobs and going to auditions is slightly more different. So I was like, God, you've got to go, Ollie, you've got to go, because this might be a good job. And the concept of doing & Juliet, which at the time I only knew was Shakespeare with pop music, sounded like a bad idea. Just like Cats, a musical with cats sounds like a bad idea, but sometimes things just work. But I thought, oh, this doesn't sound like it's going to be very me. And I almost didn't go. But I went, and I remember stepping in the room and really not being bothered if they gave me the job or not. I was just there to book the room and carry on grafting, keeping myself in the mix. Because if you keep yourself in the mix, you never know where it's going to lead to. So that's what I do. Even if I don't fancy something, if I don't think it's right for me, I still give it my all and still get up and go, because you don't know where it's going to lead to. And that ended up being one of the best decisions of my life, because & Juliet was so much fun and such an incredible show. And I worked with some brilliant people, and the director books me now for jobs on several things. And I'm glad I went to that, but you have to be in it. You have to be in it. Whether you want the job or not, you have to be in it. And I think I've learned that now, that even when things come through that I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. It's like, you should do it. You should go for it, because you don't know where it's going to lead.
Yeah, and thank goodness you did go that day. Imagine if
Yeah,
you didn't.
I know. I would have been sat there watching someone else do it. Because my kids love & Juliet. They went to see it so many times. And I
Oh,
would have hated myself, because that was one of the most heartwarming moments, was having them come and sit in the theatre and in the box one night and stuff, and then just
oh,
see me doing what I love doing. And it also, they sort of, for that night, they understood why I go in the dining room and sing, or why I'm learning things here and there. They said, oh, right, okay. The only problem is they still think that when I go to work, they think I'm going and doing & Juliet. I'm like, no, that's different.
oh, and how does it feel for you, seeing your kids in the audience when you're on stage?
Yeah, like I said, they're completely my why now. Let's face it, we get into this career because we love it and stuff, but very quickly, as you grow older and stuff like that, you've got to pay bills. It becomes a job. So we're lucky and we're privileged to do something that we still love, but doing it 8 shows a week for a long period of time sometimes is hard. And reminding yourself why you're doing it, and yes, you're doing it for the audience to tell a story and to hopefully move people, entertain people, but you're also doing it so that you get paid your wage so you can live your life. And working as a performer and an actor, it can very quickly get taken away from you. So when you've got it, you've got to work hard and you've got to be grateful for it. Um, and, and what it provides my family is a freedom, a roof over their heads, and for them to carry on doing their clubs and for them to grow and be children. I'm being a provider. So to have them sort of come and see the show and love it as well as much as I do is really nice, because not only am I providing for them, but they're also seeing something. They're seeing something that they're proud of. And I've done a show since then that wasn't suitable for them to come and watch, and I was like, oh, this is a shame. I want every show for them to be able for them to come and see it, but it's not always the luxury. But you definitely see why sometimes famous actors who, when they have children, suddenly start doing voiceovers for Disney characters or pop up in these children entertainment films and stuff like that, because suddenly they're like, I want my kids to see me do something, rather than some of the gorier action films that they've probably done before that, or stuff that maybe isn't appropriate. So it definitely has become a factor of what jobs maybe excite me a bit more, is stuff that my family can come and see.
Yeah. What a special feeling that must be.
Yeah.
So if you were, say, on the other side of a panel or a casting director,
Mhm.
what would be the most important personality traits for you to accept that person into your company?
From what? From what I get from an audition, or from what I would try and find out from an audition? Because I think when you come in and you just stand there and you sing your song and stuff, you can give a certain sense of yourself. But uh, the the most important thing with casting and getting a show, which I think people overlook a lot, is that you have to have a team. You have to have a team of people that work well together, that will work well when the chips are down, and that will bring as little drama as possible. Now that's so hard to find out in a 15-minute audition, but you can sit down and talk to people. You can get a better sense and take time over finding out if they're the right person for the job, as well as a person, not just from their talent. And that's very important. So if I was a casting director or a director, I would be setting aside some time in an audition to actually chat to someone and
Yeah.
to how they are, of a person and stuff like that, and just get a sense of them. But I think in musicals, you really need to be able to sing. You really need to be able to sing. There will be a handful of tracks going out there that they need someone to be a specialist dancer or cover a role or look a certain way. But on the whole, you've got to be able to sing. It doesn't mean you have to nail the audition, because a casting director understands that you're not going to be 100% on form. You might be a little bit nervous. Christ, I mean, I got the job Kinky Boots, and I don't think I ever once hit the top note in the audition. I don't know why. I could not get it out. And eventually, like, we know you can do it. I was like, really? Because I'm not feeling that confident anymore. But when we got to the show, it was fine, and it came out fine. So they do understand that it's not going to be perfect. But I would like to see people who are willing to take risks,
Yeah.
that are confident but not cocky,
Yeah, that's important.
and they're respectful. And that, so some people like to come in with that, right, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to be the star straight away, and they're going to see that star quality and stuff. And I mean, I guess there'll be some people who like that, but a sense of humility of when you're walking in the room and talking to your panel is nice. But then a point when you have to switch it on, that's when you can bring your star quality to it. But coming in with a sort of aloofness or arrogance, I think, could sometimes put people off. So yeah, but if you look like you've done the work, or it's very apparent if you've done the work, if you know your words, not if you fumble, that's different. But if you know the work, that's good. Also, not looking too desperate is also good. I mean, I'm probably contradicting myself here a little bit, because it's a hard balance to get. But if there's any casting directors watching, please just put your fingers in your ears right now, because I will often learn a script inside out and then sometimes hold the papers in my hand just to make it look like this isn't the finished product.
It's clever.
that would be my tip, because I used to go in so polished and knowing it, just like they're like, "Do you want to hold the papers?" I'm like, "No, I know it." And maybe it came across cocky, but maybe it also came across like, okay, so that's the level we're at. That's where we're going to get to. Whereas if you kind of, it's like it still gives you room for development, because there is always going to be room for development. But maybe the casting directors may not see that. So you can take things out your ears now. I was just saying stuff about, how it doesn't matter. But yeah, there would be my top tips.
Yeah, great. This might be a hard question, but out of all of the musicals you've done, what has been your favorite song to sing?
Ooh, that is a tough one. Um, yeah, that's really hard. I mean, I've been very lucky. I mean, I think I can scrap all the Kinky Boots apart from Everybody Say Yeah at the end of Act One, because that's great fun, and you got to do stuff on the travelator things.
Yes.
So I'm cutting Kinky Boots out. Guys and Dolls ultimately was probably too low for me.
Yes.
It was a bit baritone-y. I mean, I enjoyed it, but it was a great music. But as far as sort of exhilarating, the music in Rock of Ages was a massive challenge, and still I consider it to be probably one of, if not the hardest male vocal in a musical, alongside like Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar and
Yes.
Freddie and Chess. It's up there. I mean, the range and the notes you are hitting constantly every night is absolutely relentless. You have to be in top peak condition to do that show, even 4 or 5 times a week, let alone getting up to 8. So there's probably a handful of songs in Rock of Ages that was really enjoyable to sing. But I'm probably going to pick Bohemian Rhapsody from We Will Rock You,
Wow. Yeah.
because it was the encore of that show, and you were like in a concert sort of vibe at the Dominion Theatre. It has this, you have the whole of the ensemble doing all those fantastic parts and those different interjections. And I got to do it a handful of times with Brian May playing the guitar.
Wow.
So probably Bohemian Rhapsody I'm going to go with, and We Will Rock You. Even though I know it's not strictly a musical theatre song, I'm going to go with that.
Doesn't matter. What a good track.
Yeah.
And what is the most busy track that you've ever had to do?
Yeah, I mean, Drew in Rock of Ages. It was like, I mean, Drew and Charlie in Kinky Boots, they're both busy, big roles for different reasons. But that was Drew was so busy. I mean, you ran off stage, someone gave you a swig of water, you maybe did a quick costume change if you had to, and then you were back on singing another power ballad. It was relentless. But the show was like a party. So backstage, it sort of almost continued. So every night we were going to work, and the cast on that were just amazing. Everyone got on really well, and probably one of the least dramas I've had on a show. And that's important to have a company that support you, because when you're doing big roles like that, you need to have everyone's backing and respect. And it was just, yeah, I couldn't do it now. I could not do it. I mean, I'd have to go into full-on training, like marathon training for it. But I mean, I was, 29, 30 at the time, so I was probably at my vocal peak. And it was before kids. And quite frankly, now you've got to get up early. And that's, when you're doing those kind of shows 8 times a week, the lions are key.
Yeah, the rest. You need to recharge.
Yeah.
In the future, if you could perform with anyone, who would it be?
I've been very lucky to perform with a wealth of the best leading ladies in the world. I've had people come over from Broadway who've asked me to sing with them at their concerts and stuff like that. So I've been very, very lucky to perform with them. There's a handful of sort of leading, I mean, we've got a lot of great leading men in this country, but there are a couple that I sort of consider to be the goats of musical theatre, so I'm going to focus on leading men. who I would love to sing with or perform opposite. I don't think it'd be possible because sometimes when you're in a sort of similar category, you're never going to get the chance to work with them.
Yeah.
And not that I consider myself on the same level as them, but in the same sort of casting bracket. Like to sing a duet with like the likes of Jeremy Jordan or Aaron Tveit, or Gavin Creel are sort of the three vocal MT gods for me. I often refer to their sort of repertoire and stuff that they've sung, and I will sing them myself. And that would be a dream. In fact, I know Gavin Creel actually sat in the front row of We Will Rock You and watched me do something at one point, and was quite complimentary. And that to me, I was like, oh yes. So
Okay.
I would love to work with, but if I had to pick one, I would love to work with Jeremy Jordan.
Great. And along the same lines, if you could pick a show to do that you've never done before, what would it be?
One that exists. Normally, the stuff when you ask people like this, when they get to this sort of dinosaur age that I'm at, you kind of start thinking the show doesn't exist or the role doesn't exist yet. But if there's a role in a show that I haven't done that I would like to do, that's tough. I guess it doesn't exist yet, but I think it will do. And I think if the Greatest Showman was to come to stage,
Yes.
that would be something because Pasek and Paul music just gets me right there, and you sort of hear that sort of music, and it sits well in the world that I sort of sit in, which is that sort of pop theatre crossover. So I understand pop singing and pop music because I've grown up listening to it, and I mean, back in the day, I had a record deal with Warner Brothers and stuff, and it didn't work out. Completely a whole other story. We'd need a whole other podcast for it. But so I understand that pop world, and I do love it. But theatre and storytelling is where my heart is at, and I think that's where the Pasek and Paul stuff really, the two worlds collide. Their lyrics are beautiful, their hooks and the melodies are great, and it normally has some sort of soaring melody that sits quite nicely in my range. So yeah, I'm going to manifest that.
Yeah, surely that will come to the stage soon. Surely.
I mean, it will do, and I mean, sadly, it will probably be Jeremy Jordan. But at the point but at the point when if that show exists and stuff, and you just think, oh, if I'm still young enough by the time it happens, if there's cast changes and stuff like that, and just because you don't get to open a show doesn't mean that the role is not worthy. You know, doing a takeover of a role is brilliant. I always say you never own a role, you rent it. And so the writers and the directors and the people who create these shows are great, and you just can kind of cross your fingers that one day you're going to get a little stint and a chance to do it. You rent that role, you do the best you can, move on.
Renting the role, I love that.
Yeah.
Talking about being in an original cast, how is it doing like the original cast recording, the opening night? How does that feel?
Yeah, well, I've only done it once. This is the thing. I've rented a lot of parts. That's the thing, and then I've only really owned one part for a small amount of time, and then had to pass it on to other people to rent. Yeah, did that, and that was Anne Juliet. It was. Well, I did the original cast of In Dreams, but that's yet to really take off or become a sort of well-known show. But yeah, doing the original cast of Anne Juliet was great. Like the story I told you with the audition, I wasn't sure about it. And then just sort of every step of the way, you were like, this is good. This knows what it is trying to be. It's not trying to be anything more than what it is. And I think that's why it worked so well. It was funny. The music was great. It just had it wasn't pretentious at all. And I got to create the role with the director and the writer in the room, where they would write jokes that sat well with me, or they would ask me, what would I say? How would I say it? What words would I use? And the team of Luke Shepherd and David West Reed are just brilliant, because they do that with all their pieces. They get to work with the actors and tweak it and make it sit well on the actors, which I think sometimes makes it hard when it comes to a cast change, because they've created the role with a certain person in mind. But as far as being the originals, it's a dream. It really is. You're creating something. There's no expectation of what you've got to do. You can put your stamp on it and create something that, what it feels like with Anne Juliet, is going to be timeless. It's going to go on from strength to strength. and it makes me feel very proud that I was part of that. And you kind of feel after that you want to do that again. So, but as actors, you don't always get to create the roles, and if you turn down every cast change just because you were waiting to do something original, I mean, for most people, you're going to end up out of work a really long time. So it's just juggling it, really. Right now, I'm sort of at a place where I am holding out for something good to do. And I think when I was younger, I maybe would be less picky. But I've found ways of supporting my family and paying the bills, and still getting my creative kicks. That allows me that time to sort of be a little bit more picky. So that's that. Yeah, if the next job isn't original, then great, and if it's not, I'll be just as happy.
Yeah. Back to about like in between shows and what you fill your time with. How do you manage your time when you're not doing a show?
Well, I mean, when I left college, it was promotional work. You know, I think I worked in a bar quickly and stuff like that. So there are the sort of go-to jobs that we sadly as actors feel like we're not qualified to do anything else. But
Mhm.
a lot of people have other sort of strings to their bow and stuff. But yeah, I mean, when I started, I did a lot of promotional work and was, handing out free chocolates, handing out flyers. At one point, I had to stand on a roundabout dressed as a banana and with a code word for a radio program, which as soon as someone phoned in and gave the code word, I could go home. And I remember it being a real low point to my career because I was doing one morning. I had to stand on a roundabout in Croydon and had this code word, and I was just like dressed as a banana with just my face sort of showing it. And a banana skin hit me in the face, and a white man,
No.
a load of builders were just mocking me, and they just threw a banana and hit me in the face. At the time, I very quickly was like, just started to laugh because what else can you do? I was like, that's quite funny. That is quite funny. So
Oh.
ranging from that to now, I teach, I coach other actors, I do acting through song. But most of the time I'm very lucky to have the opportunity to sing with some of the top orchestras in the country and the world. People get me to come along and sing everything from repertoire from musical theatre stuff to the Christmas concerts to Queen music to 80s. There's all these symphonic concerts that happen, and I'm very lucky to do that because that's quite a small percentage of performers who are asked to do that kind of material, and it takes a lot of graft, and you have to sort of network and get your foot in with other companies to do that. So that's what I do to get by now. And guest entertainment work on cruise ships and stuff. I'm just starting to sort of dabble in that, which can keep you ticking over for a month and still keep you available for auditions. But I'm not going to lie, finding something else that you can do to work alongside this business is hard, but very important. And whether you're serving coffee, whether you're working in a restaurant, whether you manage to get a great job, or you're working in media, or you're being very proactive with all your podcasts and stuff like that, which is really commendable. In fact, my wife, Michelle, who I don't know if we didn't go into it in great details, but has been working with you at your college. She said, "Oh, Matilda's going to be fine. She's really entrepreneurial. You can just tell that she's hungry for it and stuff like that." So that is part of the battle. That is a massive part of the battle, is just being the kind of person who can think outside the box and be proactive. You can't you can't take it for granted and sit around going, "Oh, I'm just going to wait for my agent to get me an audition, or I'm just going to wait for something to turn up." You have to be proactive almost from the moment you leave college, so you don't, because you very quickly can get yourself in debt, and then it becomes very hard for you to be at your best for auditions. So as much as you want to find something that can be flexible around what you do, you also need to make sure that you don't stray away from plan A.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a real juggle, but stay proactive and keep yourself healthy and happy so that when the auditions do come in, you're all good. Because if you're not, it's very, this business can be very tough, especially in the first 5 to 10 years if to try and make a success of yourself. And some people, it's not for them, and they throw it all in. But if you've got something that you can work alongside what you're doing, you're going to stick it out for longer. And the longer you stick it out, the higher chance you are of getting that lucky break and making a success of
Yeah.
being someone in the performing arts. That is not to say that stopping and quitting at some point in your career is the end of the world. I've got lots of friends and stuff who I went to college with or stuff that have just ended up going, you know what? It's not for me anymore. I had a great time, but it's not for me. But the
Yeah.
skills you learn training in the arts, and not just training in it, but actually performing in it, will put you in such great stead to work in all different offices and professions and stuff like that. So stick at it and know that what you're doing is, especially in a world where everybody is probably becoming a little bit socially recluse and awkward, the skills you have as a storyteller and as a performer are not just there for the stage. They're there for you for life and for whatever career you may end up in or find yourself as a little mid-phase to your life. Just keep,
Yeah.
it's all the pursuit of happiness. So keep going with it, but be proactive to get something that works alongside your performing career.
Yeah, so true. And the last thing I always ask all my guests on this podcast is if you could nominate someone to come onto the podcast to impart their knowledge on the industry, who would it be? And I'll reach out to them.
Oh my goodness, who would it be? Who's the most knowledgeable person I know? I mean, a performer that you should speak to who, I mean, have you ever spoken to Kerry Ellis?
I need to get her on. She'd be
Yeah,
great.
she's great. She's lovely and she's so grounded and is managing that juggle of being um, a family mum and all that, and still and still managing to do sort of the gigs and stuff alongside, and then getting the auditions and stuff for work and stuff. She's a real inspiration,
She'd be really
and,
fab.
she's a lovely grounded woman as well. So yeah, I would say Kerry. Get Kerry Ellis on.
I will reach out to her. Listen, thank you.
I will send her a text as well.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Listen, it's been great having you on. Thank you everyone for listening. Hope you've enjoyed, and we'll see you next week.
Pleasure. Thanks very much,
Thank
Matilda.
you. Bye.